Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Property Management Show, where we deep dive into the world of property management, marketing, and entrepreneurship. Your hosts are Marie Tefman and Brittany Jones from Fourandhalf Marketing Agency. Since 2012, we have helped hundreds of property managers like you grow their business by using marketing that attracts owner leads. Whether you need help with your website, your SEO, online reputation, paid advertising like pay-per-click, social media, content like video and blogs, you name it, we can help you. Visit fourandhalf.com to learn more. That's fourandhalf.com. So in the last episode of the Property Management Show, we were talking to Jessica Schirmeister and Jason Zimmerman from Tenant Property Management about midterm rentals. And, we were talking then about the basics of, this kind of flavor of property management, as well as how they got into that business. In part two, we dive deep more into kind of like the finances, like when it may make sense, when it may not, as well as some challenges along the way that they've encountered in their experience. So here is part two of our discussion.
I have a question. You mentioned the investment a while back about purchasing the furnishings, right? So given that investment, are you recommending to current long-term clients to convert to midterm? Or is it mostly just the properties that already are there or are getting purchased?
Yeah. So what I do is sort of crunch the numbers. I'm a numbers person, and my goal managing for other people is to help them make money. So there is a point where it starts to make sense, and that really is are we going to be able to get $4,000 or more every month for your house? Is where it kind of, after looking at 50 deals, that's where it starts to make sense. If you have a real small property, you'll see a lot more competition in the furnished market. And so many of the fixed costs are not, they don't grow with the rent, meaning your internet bill is the same, whether I rent your house for $9,000 a month or $2,000. Like, there's not a surcharge because it's a big fancy house, right? Internet is fixed. The cost, if it's on a normal city lot, even the cost for lawn care between $1 million house and a $250,000 house is probably exactly the same if they have the same lot size. So those fixed costs that don't, come down with a cheaper property or less expensive property, those erode the benefits of furnishing to where you're probably not going to make any more money. But once, you can find a property that will generate, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year, then you have that extra gross revenue to cover all of the expenses for the utilities and all those new things that you wouldn't be paying for. Mm-hmm. The other sort of strategic financial thing to evaluate that I think is so important, and why I've personally furnished half of my houses now. I own 16, and now I've got 8 of them furnished. Is that there's very few opportunities where you can increase the rental value of your home significantly without increasing the property tax base or the insurance expense. So if you want to get, I want a house that'll rent for $5,000 a month, like, you can go buy a more expensive house, but then you got your taxes and your insurance and all that go up. Your repairs, the roof is bigger, everything's more expensive. But if you can take a smaller property and take it upscale on the finish out, the tax assessor isn't going to come in and say, "Wow, you bought a $2,500 recliner. That's really awesome. They don't, right? That's not property. That's not gonna. You don't have to pay that every year to the county. So because of that, it does make sense on properties that are maintained really well, and that can be in a market where they can generate enough money to where your net goes up. And when I've talked to clients about it, I kind of like for me personally, I put that at about, if I can increase my net profit by $5,000 a year, then it's worth the effort of making the kind of that change. And different people will have a different number for that, So that's kind of where I would start to say, hey, how much more would you have to make every year for this to be worth your while? And then the other thing is really too, back to that, maybe the long-term strategic plan of the owner. If they're like, I want this house to be in great shape when my kids inherit it 20 years from now, then they may be really interested in furnishing it out, because now we can take care of that home at a much higher level for the next 20 years. And it's not going to be, run down, and then you get a huge, CapEx expense if the whole home needs an update. And so those would be the two big reasons. If you really want to take care of that house a lot better, or increase that annual positive cash flow.
Yes, absolutely. Because I feel like every, guest tenant that we haven't had in there, I don't think there's one that I haven't, made a house call in and gone to put eyes on the property while they're there. So you do constantly have someone at your house putting eyes on it. Whereas, sometimes a long-term tenant, you don't. So.
Yeah, I had a question. I was just thinking of this when you were talking about, furnishings. Do you ever encounter owners who want to save money by using their old furniture in their furnished rentals? And I can think of 10 things that could go wrong with that. But do you encounter that?
All the time. Yeah. And you just have to explain it in a way whereas, if you are coming to this rental and paying, $4,000 and above for it, would you put in a bad review and complain if there was stains on the couch or if there was crayons on the coffee table, So it's being able to explain it in a nice way. There's a higher level of standard when it comes to furniture and furnishings, and we can use some of your stuff, but not all of it. And so it's going through with them and explaining why it doesn't work, and why we need new ones, and then giving them estimates on new furniture.
That part must be exciting when you tell them to part with money to invest in the property, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But most people take it pretty well.
Do you have a checklist?
And there is.
I'm sorry, what?
Do you a checklist of stuff? Hey, go purchase this, or do you purchase it on their behalf, or?
So we have found in the years that we've been doing that it's a lot easier for us to go purchase them, because we have learned what works and what doesn't work. So in order for us to do turns and for us to have it be, run smoothly and efficiently, most people don't think about, shower curtains, having them linen so you can wash them in between turns so you don't have added costs buying new stuff every single time. Mm-hmm. Most people don't think about that. So letting us go in and purchasing it, and along with, we know what brands will stand the tell of time.
Yeah.
And so it's just a lot easier for us to go do it. Along with, some people will go out and buy, colorful things, and sometimes that just doesn't work. Most of the time we will buy, white towels, white linens. So that way we can bleach them in between guests. 'Cause it's an added benefit that most people like as a guest. So we definitely do like doing it. And we do have a list. It's just a furnished home list that I go through with a new client. And you just check to see if it's in the home. And if not, it's just things that need to be added before we market it.
That makes sense. And now I'm kind of like, oh, of course you do that. You're managing the property.
Yeah,
there are, occasionally a time where an owner may have some, really quality things in a home. And if the situation, if somebody is really actually downsizing, they may simply have really nice things that they can use. And so I would often ask an owner, well, why don't you want it? And if the
That's a
answer is
good
like,
question.
well, because it sucks and it's uncomfortable, then no, we don't want to live in the house.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah.
But if it's like, yeah, we're going from a
smells
5-bedroom house to a 2-bedroom house, and I don't need this, this really nice bedroom set because I don't have that bedroom anymore, then it may make sense. But when talking to people that are contemplating making this change, I have found a good way to think about it is if you're going to get into the furnished home rental business on anything short-term, medium, long, whatever, you're starting a small business. If you can find a brand new turnkey home to go buy, you're just buying a house and it's not going to need any work. You buy a house and you're going to put it up for rent and that's it. And that is pretty simple. Getting into furnished is the starting of a business. Like if, and the building is part of it. Like if you're to go buy a building to put a restaurant in, but then also the rest of starting that restaurant is you're going to buy tables and spoons and all, placemats and tablecloths and a million other things. And just like a good restaurant doesn't not buy good tables and good chairs, your house, your business that you're starting is going to need that stuff. And it's a great question to run by your CPA, is to ask, hey, if I did spend $45,000 on furnishers, how am I going to be able to depreciate that? Because it is, most people find pretty favorable depreciation schedules on furniture because it's not like a house where they make you stretch it out for 2 or 3 decades. So it can be a great way if you have some money to invest and you're not knowing what to do with it. It can be a very good, way to really build value into your house.
Yeah. And I will say, like, if people do have, like some stuff that needs to be replaced, I mean, most people, once you explain the theory behind it, they are extremely realistic and, say like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yes, we'll change that out. And most of the time, especially when people do want this, they do have nice furniture. So it's just kind of filling in the pieces. So,
yeah. And I had one final question. So I know that short-term rentals have been inundated with so much regulation now, like from coast to coast. Do you feel like the more people get into midterm, regulation might also follow and make it harder? Or do you feel like that's nowhere in the horizon?
So there's 2 places that can do like rules and regulations over rentals, and that's, the city, they have their own rules and regulations. And then now we're starting to see it with a lot of HOAs. So when we do client meetings, we like to check with the city rules and regulations just to see what they are, along with the HOA. A lot of the time we're seeing about that 30-night mark. And that's, just the HOA, the city's way of trying to keep out those weekenders that are coming for parties and trying to keep it on like a month-to-month base lease. Wouldn't you agree, Jason?
Yeah, and I would be, I guess, I've thought through it legally quite a bit, and I don't know that a city could really get down to the level of, well, you can't rent a house with a couch in it. I think the furnished or non-furnished, hopefully, is a thing that cities don't get into. I guess there's a lot of crazy cities out there, so I don't see that being an obstacle. And I also would be surprised if the midterm rental tenants are going to be doing enough disruption in neighborhoods that it will warrant a response, because for the most part, it's a very similar use to just somebody being in there for a 12-month lease versus a 6-month lease. It's a pretty similar activity, I guess, for the house. So I don't anticipate a lot of further, I guess, frustrations coming around. If there was an increased supply and people having that furnished long term, and I kind of would anticipate that just the trend of having furnished homes available for any sort of lease is going to, be on the uptick. Like we're already seeing that in and have for the last decade in college markets and some of the real upscale college housing. Now that's either just included or it can be added in for not a huge expense. And, that's going to start planting the seeds in future renters that, hey, in college, I didn't have to get my own junk.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
like, why do I really need all my new junk? So no, I think the long-term viability of that would be pretty good. And, even if you did see a real, draconian 12-month minimum, which some HOAs are doing.
Oh, really?
I've seen a few, and they're I think those are going to eventually be challenged legally. We've seen in Texas a few HOAs get sued just on discrimination for there was one where they prohibited a landlord from using renting a house if they were getting a check from a third party, like a Section 8 or a voucher.
Oh,
they just
wow.
said you can't do that. And
self-managing HOAs.
Yeah. So that was maybe the first time where an HOA really overstepped to where the state has stepped in. Actually you can't, as an HOA, discriminate against people in that way. So I think that we will see discrimination suits start off to say, hey, why can somebody, buy a house, live there for 6 months and sell it, and somebody not rent a house, live there for 6 months and move out? It's renter status like that isn't a protected class yet, but the trend in housing is to get away from discrimination, not move towards it. And so I would anticipate that we'll see more legislation almost in favor of both sort of landlord and tenants' rights, like in opposition to city and HOA restrictions, because it was a big talked about issue at our last Texas annual real estate meeting. Some of these HOAs getting in trouble with the state for things that they thought were discriminating, and that is the direction that they're going. So I kind of think that'll get corrected. And so, I think long-term, I'm not concerned about it enough that I'm changing course on how I'm investing with my own houses. So
That's awesome. Thank you so much for all those insights. Is there anything else you'd like to share to our audience who may be tempted to venture into, furnished housing in their property management business after hearing all the benefits that you shared with us today? Any final kind of parting thoughts or advice?
I would say the biggest thing that you'll investor, if they're trying to analyze, hey, is this something that I should do, is you do need to look at it as a yearly, run your analysis of all your income and expenses yearly, because it's not consistent. You're going to have, I see people getting into it that maybe they shouldn't, because they're like, well, if I'm not netting $2,200 a month, I don't have any money to make my mortgage. If that's your situation, then, that was me on my first rent house, right? I'm not saying you shouldn't be into real estate, because you got to start somewhere, but the ups and downs and the inconsistent cash flow of a furnished rental will probably add unneeded stress to your life, because you'll have good months and bad months. And most markets, prices change seasonally. There's a peak season and an unpeak season. It's really cheap to go to stay in a fancy house in Vail in April when everything's mud, right? That's not Christmas. Christmas is probably 8 times as much as mud season. So if you're like, well, I can't make it through mud season, then you shouldn't, then that's not going to be a good thing. So, really crunch the numbers annually. And then the other thing is to calculate in, look back and say, how much did my last make ready cost me between my tenants? And then as you're crunching numbers looking forward, if you're to furnish it, think, hey, you're going to have some more expenses along the way, but you're probably not going to get that giant make ready every 2 years or however often your tenants move out.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then to not freak out like first month it goes bad, because things are up and down, and tenants will do bad things, and you're like, what am I doing this for? And so just step back and say, hey, how's the last 12 months been? And
big picture.
And yep. So keep the big picture in mind. And if that's if that, is causing you stress just hearing it, then there may be so much uncertainty in the business that, I may not be a good fit. I hate to see people get into something that is going to keep them up at night, or, just has other negative effects, because you'll have really good months, and you might get that awesome 6-month tenant, and you're going to feel like you're the smartest investor ever. But then it might sit there for 3 weeks, and you're not hearing from anybody, and then you get all those utility bills, and you're going to feel like
I was
stupid idea.
Yeah.
So it's a cyclical thing, and so you just kind of have to look at it, not on a weekly, monthly basis. We have often our new clients, they'll be every week want to call Jessica and say, well, who's coming next, and where are they, right? And like, if you're going to obsess over it like that, probably not a good idea, because you'll make yourself crazy.
Yeah. That's when you have to remind them, this is an investment. It's not your home anymore. It's okay that no one's in it this week. It's going to be okay. And some people don't have the stomach for that. But that's when you have to remind them, we do have slow times, and then we do have super busy times. So,
and Jessica made a good thing, just of things I've seen people get into that they didn't end up enjoying it. If you feel an emotional attachment to your house, if you're like, oh, I'm gonna cry if somebody puts a nick in that room where I measured how tall my kid was, right? Or if you're
paint over those markings, right?
Yeah, but you got to move, and you want to stay invested. Either you got to get to the point where you're like, hey, that was our house, and I'm not real emotionally tied to it, and that's okay. Or, sell that one and buy one specifically as a investment, because we do definitely see people struggle emotionally, like when something bad happens, and wins, because in real estate, something bad will happen someday. Like it will happen. If that's going to make you miserable, then sell that house and just start fresh, because you're, the ability to pick out the perfect house for a furnished home, for lots of reasons will pay off. Things that are, just massively important. Like I personally, when I'm looking now, I won't buy one if it wasn't built with foam insulation, because your Airbnb guests are going to get there, and when it's 112 degrees out, they're putting that air on 68 no matter what you say. And if you put some kind of janky limiter on the air conditioning and somebody's paying $7,000 a month, trust me, you're going to get murdered on your review. So you need something that's insulated, so you don't get a $900 electric bill. And that, on traditional landlords don't normally think about utility costs, because it's up to the tenants. The tenants are paying it.
That's true.
But you go and add, we just foamed a house just to improve the insulation. We saw our utility bill go down over $200 a month.
Wow.
And it cost us about $10,000 to foam it, which sounds like, well, $10,000, that's a ton for an upgrade on insulation. But if it saves us $2,400 a year, we're making 24% on our insulation, right? Like that's our savings. There's not a lot of good options where you can put $10,000 and make, $2,400 a year. So things like that are so important.
Well, and especially Oh, sorry.
So I was just going to say, like, if the demands of tenants is so high, like I just encouraged a client at a house that's 25 years old. It's certainly not, shot or anything, but was thinking about taking the plunge to furnish. And I said, let's sell that one, because for $30,000 more than we sold your house for, we can go to a little different area and get you new construction. Right now, our tenant complaints are going to be way less, because everything just has to be perfect. And you're, doing that in a historic home can be a nightmare. But new construction, if it was done right, you can deliver what people are asking for a lot better. It's why you see a lot of hotels like sell their buildings and lease them back for 30 years, because they know they don't want them in 30 years either. Because it'll cost them as much to remodel as it would be to build from scratch. So, that brand new or like nearly new construction, super well insulated, high energy efficient features can save you massively on a furnished home.
Yeah, especially, since our midterm rentals, we do have the utilities included. And since we do state that, we can't regulate and, mandate on how much they use. Because if you think about when you go into a hotel, the first thing you do is bump down the thermostat because you want it cold in there. And, and that's exactly what people who stay in an Airbnb want too, because everyone has their own, specific idea of what is comfortable. And so there's no way to regulate that. And so buying a home that's energy efficient and one that has insulation, good windows, it's really going to help with your utilities.
I make it too cold for Marie.
I know. We were always fighting at the Airbnb because she's always burning. Yeah, there was a limiter.
Like it really cold.
That was a surprising thing. There was a limiter on the thermostat.
Did you find that kind of like they're being cheap? Like was that your thought?
I just felt like it was a little bit awkward because it was in Atlanta and it was getting really cold at night in like the 40s. But they had the thermostat. The thermostat set to cool in 68. So it's not going to cool it at all because it's already colder, but we couldn't heat it. So it was just awkward because I texted them. I was like, hey, how do we do the heat? We've got some people here who are a little chilly. And then they churned it up to like 74 or something. And then I was like, well, wait, we don't need it
too
that
much.
hot.
Yeah, that's too much.
I'm like, can we just have it heated like a couple degrees or something? So it was just a little bit uncomfortable because I didn't want to bother them, but it was also like you're restricting this thing. And to your point, it was an older home because it makes sense.
That's why there was
the insulation is probably not foam or what other ones there are, but
yeah, and that's definitely something that we try to avoid, just because if that did happen to me in a rental, I would be annoyed. Why can't I just do this? Like I'm paying all of this money to stay here and I can't even turn the heat up. Like I'm freezing.
And that's the thing too, right? Like it was late. Or like, do we text the host? But then it's like, we don't want to bother them, but we're also
and
freezing.
They were extremely responsive too. So that was one thing, but it's like, you also don't want people to feel like and not want to. Yeah.
And two, we have found it's a big negative. Any sort of, landlord meddling into that sort of quiet use of the house, kind of a real estate term, or quiet enjoyment. One of the things I think a lot of Airbnb hosts fail to sort of learn is just some basics of real estate, because a lot of people get straight into Airbnb hosting without having real estate license or any training. Is that you are a tenant. You can call them a guest or a whatever, but it's still a landlord-tenant relationship, and the duration doesn't change that. And people just, that's part of, in most states, like tenant rights is to be able to use the property the way it's designed to be used, and having to text somebody to turn the heat up is just not giving that person who rented your home what they paid for. If you, I've been in, we had where we were maybe in Italy, where at that time, like utilities were crazy expensive. And they put it in writing. They're like, when you get here, you got to give us like 300 euros if you want to put the air, get the thing on. But they disclosed it. It was going to cost them a fortune, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people that were just used to dealing, like not all homes had it. So that was their thing. But if you're not going to put in your disclosure that, you can rent this, but not use the thermostat,
right.
There's an assumption that you should be able to.
Yeah.
And,
absolutely. And I feel like, a lot of hosts and, people that are starting to do this, they do kind of forget the element that this is such a review-based business that, if I were there staying and I had, a thermostat that was regulated and I was freezing, that would probably be the first thing that I would put on a review. And it's not because, like I'm trying to be, a Karen or anything like that, or, complain. But it's just that kind of aspect where, you're there to have privacy and to be comfortable. And if they're trying to over-regulate that, it's not going to go well for them.
Yeah, all those things, anyone thinking about it, just don't, any sort of video, doorbell, any video, anything, just do not do that. It just immediately, I've been in enough Airbnbs where I'll just kind of walk in. If I see a camera, I'm just going to unplug the modem. And people now just know, well, that's just what I'm going to do.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, it's pretty uncomfortable.
I mean, everyone's got a hotspot on your phone, whatever, it is the data from like we have a really awesome rep at Airbnb who helps us with stuff, and they love data, and they're like, yeah, like 98% of people hate any sort of a video, anything. And
I'm seeing it more commonly, like where they're saying we're monitoring who's walking in and out.
Yeah.
Like everybody has the Ring cameras. The last two I stayed at had them. And I know some people really want them, but it is interesting how it's coming up more.
Yeah. And once you have one experience like that, we were traveling for a funeral and had family members stop over because we were going to literally ride together to a funeral. And I get a notice from the host, hey, I noticed you had 6 people walk through the front door. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to unplug the modem now, leave me alone. Like you just, again, nobody wants to be stalked.
Situation.
And your use of a home. I mean, we're not having a party, but if you have family and they're going to, come by and whatever, it's not a violation of any rule or any ordinance. It's not illegal. You really do have to. If you can't rent the house and then not feel like you have to spy on the people, you shouldn't do it because. That will get you bad reviews, and then you'll be out of business. Because it doesn't take more than 3 of those. If 3 people comment on that, it will quickly have a big negative impact on people booking, because it's one of those things you don't think of to think about. Like, should I think to ask? Are you going to be creeper stalking me while I'm there? Most people don't, because they assume they're not, right? But then once they see it in a review, then you're like, whoa, I don't, that sounds awful, so especially like we have a couple homes with pools, right? Like people are going to be super sensitive. Oh, we don't want any pool parties, so we're going to watch you in the swimming pool. By anyone else ever coming.
Right.
What somebody puts a comment about your pool camera on your listing. I mean, like I'm not staying there. So.
Not going there. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Not everyone needs to see this in a bathing suit either. So, and I'm sure most people, probably agree with that. Like I don't need some stranger seeing me in a bathing suit either. So,
and the possibility of like recording, and it's just weird. It's just weird.
Yeah.
A lot of creepy aspects about that. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, this discussion has been very, very helpful in kind of like uncovering this big world of midterm and furnished rentals, right? Like I coming in had a lot of, assumptions that were plainly not true, right? And so thank you so much for the stories and the insights that you gave us and our audience.
Very helpful.
Of course. Thank you for having us.
Yes, thanks for letting us do this. It was great.
And that's all we have for this episode of the Property Management Show, brought to you by Fourandhalf Marketing Agency. Since 2012, we have been helping property managers just like you grow their business by getting you more owner leads through marketing. Whether you need help with your website, your SEO, online reputation, video or blog content, copywriting, social media, paid advertising. Did I already say that? You name it, we can help you. Visit fourandhalf.com to get growth started today. That's fourandhalf.com. If you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and show us some love by leaving us a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. And if you have any suggestions for future episodes, any comments about this one, go ahead and send an email to marketing@fourandhalf.com. Thank you so much for tuning in, and see you next time.